Good morning. Hi, I'm Eric. I live in Cincinnati. Actually, I moved to Cincinnati in 1996. I had more hair, granted. I was probably also a little bit more naive. I was probably a little more idealistic. I had crazy ideas, probably not any fewer than I have now, but they were more bizarre. Like one time I went in and talked to my boss in his office and said, Jim, we have this huge rusting railroad bridge that goes across the river. Could we turn it into a pedestrian bridge or something? And I know he did it just to get me out of his office, but he said, yeah, go do that, right? And I heard, oh my God, that's the best idea I've ever heard. You should go do that. You should go run off and try to do this. And then a few years later, the Purple People Bridge, cleverly named for its coat of paint, opened in Cincinnati, fundamentally changing the way that people work in Cincinnati, use the riverfront. 500,000 people a year are biking or riding or walking or running over this bridge. Probably more important to me is it changed the way that I perceived my city. It actually made me fall in love with my city, partially because they would let me fuss with a bridge, but mostly because this was a place that I could actually get things done, that where people believed in me and were going to give me a chance to do something. So I've been stuck and addicted to Cincinnati for the last 22 years, and every single day trying to figure out, how do I get more people to do more things in our city? And it keeps coming back to these it comes back to these really bizarre collection of things. Part of it is just permission, right? If we can give people in our community some permission or legitimacy or validation of ideas, that may be enough. Just to give them a little nudge, get up off the couch, it's a good idea, go do that. Sometimes that's enough. So for me, it was also about putting together an incredible group of people around me who shared my passion in doing something in the community. They all had their own superpower, they had their own networks, but they were this group of people who wanted to get involved and wanted to get in the game. And it was critical to have that group of people around me. You can't do hardly anything by yourself, so having that group with me has been really critical. And yeah, it was to have some money to do some of this stuff. It doesn't happen cheaply necessarily to turn a bridge, but this idea of the funding got me thinking, right? How are people getting stuff done in cities? For a bridge, or earlier on, you had a little bit more generous public purse. Maybe there was more government money available for something like this. That's probably not the way things are going forward. The projects I end up getting involved in usually don't cash flow very well, so I'm not going to business backers, I'm not going to venture. That's probably not the best source for me. So we ended up having to go to philanthropy more often than not to find funding for these ideas. And when we talk about philanthropy, most people think about philanthropy and they think about foundations, and they think about these big names who set up big foundations, who have these big national, international ambitions. We're going to cure the world of cancer, or we're going to solve world poverty, or we're going to solve hunger all over the world. Big ambitions, big goals, which is great, and they're doing amazing work, but it was still an interesting kind of model for me to try to struggle with. And it didn't make a lot of sense, because even small foundations, big ones, small ones, they all kind of use the same model. There's this pile of money, and this money gets invested in great nonprofits, and those nonprofits are being called on to do something to help people, right? And I'm here trying to think of wait a minute, I'm trying to just help the people, or trying to get people to do things. This is a hard model to deal with. But foundations, obviously, everybody in this room knows, foundations are only like a piece, a really small piece probably, of the philanthropic world, right? Even just like a Tom's model, buy one, give one, right? Millions of pairs of shoes being donated, sticking with feet, Bombas socks, which I'm wearing, no plug. But they're giving like 4.5 million pairs of socks to homeless shelters. This buy one, give one model, definitely part of philanthropy now, definitely not part of foundations. Crowdfunding, right? This is like completely crazy, different, change the world. But anybody know the first civic crowdfunded model? Anybody know? I was thinking about this and did a little Googling and realized 1884, Joseph Pulitzer raised $100,000 from readers of his newspaper to fund the base of the Statue of Liberty. 1884, first civic crowdfunded project, I think. But now, with Kickstarter doing, there's $2 billion committed towards projects of 100,000 different projects, and GoFundMe and Indiegogo and IOBE and fundraise, no matter where it is, this crowdfunding model is completely changed the game. And then you have this crazy idea where 2.5 million people are going to dump ice buckets of water over their head in the name of some organization and some disease they probably didn't know anything about at the time, but now they do. And now a lot of them are speaking on behalf of this, and a lot of them are raising money for this thing. Again, just this very different model of philanthropy, which all of these models of philanthropy get the idea that you need people engaged. That the philanthropy is more effective when there's people bringing forth ideas and people funding those ideas collectively. There's this interesting marketplace. This is where philanthropy is going, but foundations are still stuck at this, right? Foundations are still stuck at this model where most of them, not all of them, 90% of them, 95% of them, still give the vast majority of their funding to nonprofits who do something to help people. And I'm trying to think, if I can do something to help people directly, is there a way we can just like skip the middleman maybe and get some of that funding directly in the hands of people? Like, what would that do? How crazy would that be? What difference would that make in a community if people had access to resources to implement these ideas that they wanted to use, they wanted to do to improve their community? It was a crazy idea. And I needed a foundation who was willing to take on this idea and think it through with me. And great news, I work for a foundation. And it actually is a foundation named for these lovely humans who have this is Carol and Ralph Hale. They had exactly the right DNA to take a gamble on an idea that was outside of the norm. These are very outside of the norm people, larger than life, but they were up for the challenge. And to be fair, most of our foundation grants still go this normal way, right? I mean, we're giving money to parks to build carousels, and we're supporting arts organizations to redo iconic architecture in our community, and we're supporting transit, and we're working with organizations to put murals on sides of buildings. But we were also really obsessed about this idea, this nugget of an idea that could we take some of our philanthropy and impact people directly with it? And if we could do this on a big enough scale, could we create this movement of people in our community who want to take charge and want to step up and do something in the community? What would happen if these people that we could invest in would be the next ones running for office, or the next ones starting nonprofits, or the next ones running businesses, or the next ones running their neighborhood organization, just that much? What would that do for a community like this? And how could philanthropy be involved in something this different? So we were like, somebody's got to figure this out. Somebody's already figured this thing out. Let's go figure it out. Let's go find out. So we spent 3 months going all over the country trying to find someone somewhere who had something to teach us about this, because we knew we weren't like the brightest people in the world. So we were going to find somewhere that did this. And we went to all these civic innovation labs that are popping up all over the country. We went to 30 of them in the course of a summer. And while they had really interest, we learned something everywhere. But we also learned that foundations were nowhere near this. This was not something that foundations wanted anything to do with. About giving directly to people, this is nuts, right? So we figured, okay, we're going to do this ourselves. So we created this thing called People's Liberty, and we packed 350 people on a hot, sweaty, nasty August day in this under construction space where we had picked out where we were going to open up a facility. We crowded everybody in the room and we said, people of Cincinnati, we are going to launch People's Liberty as a philanthropic lab that's going to use new different types of grant making to improve Cincinnati by uncovering and investing in great people. And there was crickets. Like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what a philanthropic lab even means. So, okay, we'll simplify it. We're going to give grants to people. We're going to give grants to people who want to make a difference in this community. And people came out of the woodwork. This is just a sampling of some of the people that we have been giving grants to for the last 2.5 years. And they are across the spectrum, from 20-year-olds to 70-year-olds, from neighborhoods all over this community in Cincinnati, doing things really big, some things not so big, serious topics, frivolous topics, but everybody wants to figure out how they can make a difference in their community, and they're coming up with different ways. We're just listening to them, asking them what they want to do, and actually even letting the community decide what gets funded. So we had this woman who decided she wanted to take old newspaper boxes and turn them into mini pantries, and has 17 of those all over the community. We have this woman who took 500 milk crates and turn them into mini container gardens because her neighborhood is a food desert and she wanted her neighbors to grow fresh fruit in their homes. So she did that. We had a guy basically take the API of real-time bus information and mount a slew of cheap tablets in storefront windows up and down commercial corridors to democratize real-time bus information for people who didn't have smartphones. But then we've also had like a little bit more frivolous stuff. We had an umbrella sharing program. We had this woman who designed 15-foot bean bags because she was curious what would happen if you put a huge bean bag in front of a library. Would people come and read together? I mean, we had a park made just of percussion instruments. We had somebody take an old camper and turn it into a mobile art gallery. Things that people just thought, this would make a difference. I think I could engage people with this. And people are coming out of the woodwork to engage with us as a foundation, which we would never have found these people. And we're doing it in 4 ways. We're giving 16 people a year 10 grand to do these small 6-month projects. And that could be, that's a lot of the stuff I mentioned before. We have a storefront in our building. We give 3 people a year the keys to our storefront and for 3 months, and 15 grand to transform our storefront into something, some interactive installation. It's been a toy library, a toy lending library. It's been a mini theater. It's been all kinds of things. And then we give 2 people a year $100,000 to take a civic sabbatical. Quit your job and work with us for an entire year to do something to make a difference in this community. What would you do with $100,000 and a year of time? So we give people that luxury. And then we hire a slew of young designers and young photographers and videographers and writers to come and work for us in something we call the Society of Mad Philanthropy, which is basically our design residency program. And it's working. As of next week, this is going to be 66 grants to individuals, and we keep hiring people. And these are not the normal suspects. These are people who are coming out of the woodwork with great ideas that we would never have found, and we're able to provide a lift to them in a way that a place-based foundation in particular, has never done. I wanted to give you a quick, little bit of deeper dive into Tracy. So Tracy is one of our Hale Fellows. She's one of the ones that got the $100,000 civic sabbatical. Tracy's also pretty proud, I don't know if proud is the right word, she's pretty upfront about the fact that she's a former addict, formerly incarcerated, and formerly homeless. And when she put her life back together, she started volunteering at the local jail in the recovery pod with women who were struggling with addiction. And she was realizing that as people were being released from jail, they were basically leaving the jail with a dead cell phone, $3 in their pocket, and the only thing they could probably remember was their drug dealer's cell phone number. And they kept going back and back and back into their old lives. And she's like, man, if I could just figure out a way to get people, while they're in jail, access to the resources that are waiting for them on the outside, and then give them some tales of hope about other people like herself who have put her life back together, could I make a difference in people's lives? So she designed this thing called Rise, which is this newspaper that is being circulated inside the jail. Actually, it's now 4 jails, and she's just started in April. So she's created this newspaper that now it is making a difference in people's lives. It's also making a difference in her life. Tracy didn't even have a bank account when she became our fellow. I mean, her life is completely changed. But we believed in her, and we went back and we realized it's more about this more than just cutting a check. It's like saying, Tracy, you and all these other people, we're going to give you permission. We're going to give you legitimacy. Whether or not you actually really need it, it's one of those, it's like almost a scarecrow thing, like from The Wizard of Oz. Okay, you had it all along, but we're going to give you that little bit of permission and that reason to get up off the couch. We're going to surround you with other people who are doing amazing things, or at least passionate about making a difference in the community, and we're going to give you some funding. And it's amazing what's happening. And this isn't just the people we're funding. We took this model and we actually gathered together a group of moms in Millvale, which is this really, really underinvested neighborhood in Cincinnati, and we said to them, okay, we think you know your community better than anybody else. What would happen if we brought a bunch of people together, access to other resources, give you a little bit of money? What would you do in the community? And they've taken this model about listening to people in the community, what they want to do, and giving them some resources, leveraging what the foundation can